Hello YouTubers, and welcome to part 2 of the graphing calculator review. Now this time round we've gone from 6 to 8, so this time we've got the HP Prime that arrived and the Casio Class Pad. We're going to compare the graphing on these. We're going to, for one, see how easy it is to enter an equation or a function, then to see how quickly it graphs, then try and navigate around that graph, basically trying to zoom in, zoom out, and then trace the actual function itself. What you want to see is the ease of entry of those functions and equations, and then obviously the ease of navigating around that graph. So let's get down to the bench and have a look at that. Right, so first up is the Texas Instruments TI-84 Plus. I'm going to use the same functions across all of the calculators, that being x squared minus 2, x plus 2, and sine x. So we're going to enter those, and of course this one is a classic. It will have the lowest resolution screen, but nonetheless fairly simple entry. Now the thing to note on this is that keep an eye on the keystrokes in terms of, let's say, getting to a variable x, or let's say your trig functions like sine. Some of those are shifted functions on the other calculators, and then obviously the navigation around the graph itself. Right, so let's start off. So on this calculator, I am going to bring you in closer to the screen once I've actually got the functions in and we go and graph it. Right, so before we actually go to our graphing functions then, the one thing I am just going to show on this calculator you need to be aware of for this particular exercise in graphing is that if we go to the mode button, on this, the one thing we do want to make sure is that your calculator is in the radians, not degrees, in radians for these graphs to graph like they are going to. I'm not going to do that, show you this mode for all the other calculators. There are a couple of calculators where there are a few quirks that you have to know about in the mode setup, and I'll address those on the particular calculators. Right, so now that we're ready to graph, on the top row here we've got y equals, we push that. It then brings up where we can go and enter our functions. So we'll start off with obviously x squared. Now in this case there is no direct variable on the keyboard, so we have to go alpha and then select our x, and then we're going to have our caret for the squared minus 2. We then enter on that. We're then going to do our obviously alpha x plus 2, we enter on that. We then get down to our third function, which is obviously our trig. We're going sine of x, we're going to close the brackets, we enter on that. So now we've got our three functions entered. It's as easy as now just pushing the graph button, but I'll bring you in closer for that. Right, and in my haste I went and entered, you can see I made a mistake on the first function over there. So I'm going to go up to that, and it's literally just easy to go and edit that. So we're going to backspace or delete, so we've got a delete key here, so I'm just simply going to go and delete what I shouldn't have had there. We then come out, and then we're going to say minus 2 and enter on that. So now we've got all our functions ready to be graphed. You've got the graph button, we simply push graph. Over here, as it's graphing, you'll see there's a little line working over here. That's to show that it's busy. So there we go, that busy line is kind of finished, and it's managed to graph everything quite nice and easily on the screen. So perhaps the first thing we want to go and do is perhaps zoom in, have a closer look at the kind of center axis over here. So I'm going to push the zoom feature, and the first thing I'll just go zoom in. I can obviously just select it with the selection like this, or I can push the number 2. I push enter for zoom in, and then what it's doing, although it doesn't tell you on the screen, you've got your cursor on the screen here, and you can go and place your cursor where you want your zoom to center. So I'll just move the cursor out so you can see it. There we go, you can see the cursor over there. So if I hit enter now, it's going to zoom into that point. So let's do that as an exercise. I hit enter. You can see it's still thinking while it's drawing. And then it's finished. Now the one thing I want to note is while I'm in this mode, if I, let's say, want to move across and view the rest of the graph to navigate to the other side, I can't. So just note that, because that's some feature that the other calculators do offer. So again, I have to go to zoom. I'm going to go to, let's say, try standard to get it back out. I just pushed the number 6. It's coming back out to originally where it was before. drawing again. Now the other handy zoom feature on here is if I go zoom and you've got box. So I enter on box, and what it's looking for here, again, even though it's not telling you, what you need to do is go and place your cursor for the first part of the box in the top corner. So I've located my cursor over there. I then hit the enter key. I then come down, and as you can see, it starts drawing a box as I move the cursor. So you can see the box being drawn there. After you've got the box on the location where you want to zoom in, I hit enter and it zooms in to where I had it. Again, you can note it's busy because the line on the side here as it draws, it's finished. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom back out to the kind of standard again, and we want to go and trace a function. So we're keeping it fairly simple. We're not trying to find the roots or intersections at this point. That would take too long. I'm going to do that in a future video. But now what I want to do is just kind of run the cursor across and trace the graph, perhaps to get a rough idea of where an intersection point is. So then you've got this trace button over here. We hit the trace. Then what happens is you can see it's noting the name of the function which is currently selected. So the up and down buttons on the navigation here will select the different functions. So you can see x plus 2, x squared minus 2, or the sine of x. So, and then if I just go left and right on the navigation, you can see the cursor is moving along the graph and it's noting the coordinates on the bottom of the screen here. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to get up to this point over here to see that a rough idea of our intersection. So I'd have to push up. I'm on the x plus 2, so that would do. I can then move down that line and roughly get to that point, and I can see what the intersection point is over there. If I wanted to get closer, of course, I could obviously go into the zoom, go select number 2 for zoom in. Where my cursor is, I then have to go hit enter. It's going to redraw around that intersection point. Still busy. You can see it's still busy in the background. It's finished. So now I've got a little closer, but the pixels are obviously on here aren't necessarily going to give me the exact point. That's where the other functionality comes into find an intersection. But that's what the kind of tracing and zooming in can help you do if you're graphing a function and want to get a rough idea. Let's say you've got an answer, you want to quickly roughly check it. Let's go now to move on to the Ti-89 and see how that handles it. Right, so now we have our Ti-89, obviously certainly the bigger brother with a fair bit more functionality than the 84. We're going to switch it on, and remember the Ti-89 has this kind of more graphical menu system, or the Ti-89 Titanium certainly does. We navigate across to graphs, we enter on that. You can then see it comes up and it's got the graph display, the axis without any graphs on there. We've got this over here, a second function. It says y equals on the F1 key. So I'm going to go with the green button over here, y equals. This allows us to go to where we enter our functions. And again, so here we've got the Ti-89 handily has some functions which aren't shifted. So we don't have to go through a shifted alpha. So we can simply go x, and I can go the kind of exponent 2 to square it, and then say minus 2. As you can see, it's been entered down here on the line before I hit the enter key, and then it comes up as one of the functions or equations to be graphed. Then going to go x plus 2, enter on that. Then going to go, we want our trig function sine, so that is a second function, second sine x, close the brackets, enter. So now we've got all our functions, we're ready to graph it, and I'll bring in a little closer. Okay, so one of the first things to notice is that the 89 certainly has a higher resolution display. I find that obviously the text is a little bit smaller, so for those of us who might need glasses, they may suffer reading the text a little more on here, especially when you get to kind of the menu system on the Ti. And the screen is obviously a little bit busier because it does have this kind of graphical menu system in there. We've got our functions. Now we want to graph it, and as you can see, it's a second function, so or a green function, I should say. So second function and then the graph. Here we go. It says busy down in the corner here while it's graphing. So there we go. So let's say we want to zoom out. On the top here, you can see on the menu system, it's giving you the kind of soft buttons over here. So it's saying F2 is your zoom. So we go to F2. I'm going to say let's go and zoom out, and I can either use the cursor keys to select, or I can just hit the number 3 on the actual keyboard, but I'm going to say that and put the enter key. It comes up and it's again what you need to do. It's asking for which point you want to zoom out for. So I can go and move the cursor around and then say, right, from that point I want you to zoom out. But I'm going to put it on the roughly the center of the graph, hit the enter key, and here we go, it zooms out so we get a bigger picture of what's going on. So it's finished zooming. So again, let's just show you the zoom feature. If I go and say F2, I want to zoom in, enter. Let's say again I want to go up to that intersection point. Tapping the keys actually navigates quicker on this, and trying to hold it down, it tends to get tied up. So a quick tap seems to work better. That's where I want to zoom in. I hit the enter key. Still busy, there we go. And now I can obviously go and focus in on that point, and you've got the coordinates over here. So we're going to zoom back out and now have a look at the actual trace feature if I want to trace each of the functions. Now I can come out, I'm going to try the zoom standard. That gets us back out. Then you've got your trace feature. And if you have a look, you can see your trace feature is set up on function F3. So we just push F3. And then immediately we obviously get our cursor. And again, left to right allows us to trace along the actual graph that we're on. Now just note this time around it doesn't tell us the name of the actual function, it's just telling us it's function number 1. If I push the up cursor, you'll see it happen to jump to number 3, now it's on number 2. So as I move along, you can see there it's tracing up on our x plus 2. Now it's on the kind of x squared minus 2 on the parabola. And you'll note that you cannot actually see the cursor because it was actually out the top of the screen. There was nothing to really tell you that, and that's something else to note when we get to the other graphing calculators. But here you go, you can see I'm now moving along that function and going up. Right, so we've kind of looked at zoom in, zoom out and tracing, but let's see, we haven't done a zoom box yet on this one. So if I again go F2, I can say box, and I can just go and select a point. It says over here first corner, so I hit enter. I then use the kind of navigation keys over here to draw a box. So I want to zoom around that point. I hit enter. And that's how we zoom around the box. And again, if I want to kind of come back to normal, I go to the standard view. And we're back out once it's finished. Right, now we get to the Ti-Nspire Cx Ks. I'm going to switch it on. Now we'll note that when I switched it on earlier, it had obviously gone into kind of its deep sleep mode, and actually took about 30 seconds to boot up, 30 to 40 seconds. It was immediate on now, but just note that sometimes obviously if it does boot up from start, it can take a while. We've also obviously got our graph feature right here on the main menu, so I'm just going to push enter to go into that mode. We've then got it comes up straight away with this graph axes. I'm then going to push menu, and you can see it's got down here, we can use the navigation pad. We go up to, my mistake, we go up to graph entry. You can see it says function, so I'm going to enter on that, and it then comes down here with a little window where I can go and enter the function. Now I'm not sure how clearly you can see the screen, so I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer so you can see the screen before I do the keystrokes. So here we go. I wanted to bring you in a little bit closer so that you can see the actual screen itself before I start entering the function, just so you can see what it does look like. I'm going to go back and show you the keyboard so you can just see the keystrokes before we come in, while it actually graphs it. Right, so on this calculator, just to make it easier to see, it has got a contrast control. It's fine for me, but obviously for the camera it's a little bit difficult. So there we go, I've adjusted the contrast down so it'll be a little bit hopefully easier to see on the camera. So right, we've got our first function and we need to obviously write x squared minus 2. So right on the keyboard you've got your whole alpha keyboard and your numerics down here. So I've got x, we're going to go squared minus 2. So I've got that, I'm going to push enter and straight away, bang, you can see it does the first graph. So again, I'm going to go menu, we want to go and edit, we want to put in a function, enter. Now we're going to simply go x plus 2, I hit enter, bang, straight away it's gone and graphed it. You do the same for the third function. We obviously want our trig function. So as you can see, the trig functions aren't by default on here, but there's a trig button over here. We push trig, comes up, we've got sine as the first one, so I've entered on that, and it's for x. I push enter. And there we go, it's graphed straight away. I'm going to bring you in a little closer. Right, so immediately as you have a look at this, we can see it's graphed it very nicely. It did it fairly quickly as well. What it does do, it displays immediately on the screen the actual function names in the relevant color for the graph. As you can see, it's color, so it's graphed them in the various colors. We do have control of a cursor to provide more functionality. We'll have a look at that in terms of navigating around just now. If I want to kind of zoom in and out, or let's just first of all try the navigation out the side. So if I hold down the cursor, go to the side and try and navigate out, you can't easily navigate around that way. So the next thing we're going to do is the zooming, and as you can see, if you hit the menu button, we can get down to window and zoom. And if I want to say, let's say zoom in, I can enter on that function. And then we get the little magnifying glass, and it's asking for a center. So I'm going to enter on that. And you can see we've still got the magnifying glass. So if I enter again, it continues zooming, which is quite nice. So we're not hopping back and forth into. I can then go and move the center, let's say, to this intersection point on the side over here. Go and hit enter, and it goes and zooms into that. Again, so if we want to zoom out, we're going to go to the menu. I'm going to go and select zoom out, enter. We then get a negative magnifying glass, and it's asking for a center, and I'm just going to say, right, you can come out from that point over there. I could obviously move that around to change the point from which it's zooming out from, and as you can see, it'll go and then center. We can obviously then go back into the menu system, into zoom, and we could say zoom box, enter on that. It's asking for the first corner. So again, let's say for fun we want to zoom into this intersection point up over here. I'm going to come up over there, enter. It's asking for the second corner, and as you can see, it's drawing the box as I move the cursor around. So from that point of view, I'm going to say this touchpad is fairly handy in terms of, instead of having to tap, you can obviously tap around, but having the touchpad does allow you to move around fairly quickly. So there we go, zoom in, I push enter, and it zooms in, and you can see the performance is fairly quick on the calculator. Next, let's have a look at tracing the functions. So to do that, I'm going to just simply try the next function where we can zoom out to the original. So if we go to standard, which is 5, and I can hit 5 on the keyboard, bang, it comes back out to the original drawing. So the next thing, we're going to go menu, we come down to trace, and you can just see it says it's got graph trace. I'm going to enter on that, and you can see it's placed a big cursor down there. So you can see I'm stepping along the function over there, and as I step, the nice thing is you can see it's actually navigating up the actual graph. So as opposed to the cursor disappearing out to the screen like it did on the others, you can see there's a bit of a lag there. Navigating back down. If I now want to, let's say, change the function that I'm on to, let's say, another one, again, I either push up or down. You can see it's gone and selected the x+2 graph. And again, if I go from left to right, it's going to navigate along there. I'll move back along this way. I'm going to select now what I want to show you, the one handy feature, is if I go to that intersection point on the graph slowly, you will actually see it notes and says y-intercept. And then you've got your coordinates down there. So that is certainly a handy feature because you're not necessarily missing like on the others. It'll only show you a certain pixeled area, but here it's actually locking onto the y-intercept. Let's go pick another function. So let's just go on to the sin x. I can navigate along over here. It's saying, look, it's reached the maximum of the graph over there. The coordinates are noted down over here. It's hit the 0 point, and you can see the value of x at the 0 point for y. Certainly a lot of nice functionality that the Texas Instruments has built into it on the Inspire. Right, next we get to the Casios, and we've got the Casio Fx 9860G2. Just to note that this does also come in an SD card version as well. So in the first part of the review I hadn't realized that, but you get an SD card version where you can up the storage on this. Right, so we're going to switch it on. It comes up obviously with its menu system, and over here it's on the kind of, we're going to go down and select graph, enter on that. We come straight up to this entry point. We're going to enter our functions. So we've got x. Now just to note on this one again, it doesn't have the variable straight off the keyboard like the other ones. So if I go alpha x, and then we're going to go squared minus 2, enter on that, so that's in there. Our next thing is obviously we're going alpha x plus 2, execute to enter it, and then we're going to go simply sine. Now our sine is nicely straight off, no shifted function. We just go sine of, not shift, alpha x, and we enter on that. So now we've got our functions entered. I'm going to bring you a little closer so we can graph it. Right, so here we go. Now that we're here, we've simply got the draw function on the soft button over here. So I hit that, and fairly quickly it graphs it very nice, quick and easy. And on this I just want to note that now using the kind of navigation pad over here, you can actually move around the graph. As I said, like I noted on the earlier Texas Instrument models, you were unable to do that. You kind of had to kind of zoom in. This graphs reasonably quickly, but you do have to wait a little bit if you are trying to navigate around a graph like this. We'll then go to the zoom. The zoom is obviously a shift, and it's on this button over here. We go zoom, and we can simply, let's say, in. Again, it's asking for a cursor point. So again, if I wanted to go up to, let's say, that intersection point over there, I take the cursor over there, I hit the execute button, and it takes us closer in over there. Again, I can navigate around from that point over there. Let's just do another zoom back out. Again, it's asking where you're zooming out from. I push that. And if we go zoom again, and let's say we go to original, it'll go back to original. Now let's have a look at the tracing feature. So the trace is obviously shift F1. We then get our cursor, and the cursor here, I must say, moves nice and quickly. So even if you're holding it down, you're not doing any tap taps. If you tap tap, it does move fast, but I can hold it down. You've got the coordinates at the bottom here, and you've got the function. Again, if I hit up or down, it's going to select the next function, happens to be sin x. I move along there. You can see we navigating there. We go up to x plus 2. It navigates there. Let's just see if it navigates out the screen. So it does navigate out the screen, but the cursor's actually disappeared out the screen and you can't see where it is. And I'll bring it back in. Again, something to note when we get to the later model. Come back down, we'll go to Sin X, see how that navigates. There we go, and it's actually moving the graph along the axis. I have noted on some of these, if you're going along the x-axis, your navigation often works and it will redraw. If you're going up and down along the y-axis, that's when your cursor often can go off the screen. Right, so let's see the zoom box feature. If we go zoom box, we select box, and again what we need to do, it's looking for the first corner. I hit execute, I then come down and I can then go and select my box. But just note, it didn't give any instructions on the screen in terms of what to do. You just have to know either from the manual or say a tutorial. So I've got the box, I'm hitting the execute button and it goes and zooms around that. Let's look at the color version of this, the Prizm. Right, so now we have the Casio Fx CG10, or also known as the Prizm. We'll power it on. Again, we get to the kind of nice menu system. It generally always powers up fairly quickly. I'm going to go to the graphing function or application. As you can see, we're straight into where we enter the actual values. So again, I'm going to go say Shift X, and we're going to go squared minus 2. I execute that or enter it. We're then going to go alpha x plus 2, enter, and then for the third one we want our trig function sine, which is straight here, so going sine of x, we execute or enter on that. We're now ready to graph, so I'll bring you in closer so you can see the actual graphing. Right, we're ready to actually draw it or graph it, and as you can see we've got the draw function on the F6 button over here. Push that. This is the busy button over, busy kind of indicator up in the corner. You can see it drew it nice and quickly. Let's see what navigation. So as I try and navigate, the one thing to note is that it takes long, it graphs, but there's a fair lag while you wait. So you can navigate around it, but you've got to wait for it to draw, and there's a fair bit of a lag. So let's just see the zoom feature. If I go, then we want to go zoom, so that's shift zoom. Let's go, let's see if it's got, so we can go back to original. Yeah, back to original. If I want to zoom into the intersection at that point over there, let's go and see zoom. So I'm going to say in, I'm going to go and place my cursor. And this I will say there's a bit of a lag if you hold down the kind of cursor control. I put it on the intersection over there, I push execute, and it takes us in there, and then back into a navigation mode. So let's go function zoom. We want to come, let's say, back out to the, I can obviously go out. It's got a pointer where it's going to center on. I come back out. I'm going to now go back to original. And the next thing I want to do is go and trace the actual functions. So we go onto the F1 feature. And now again, the things to note in this screen is that it is actually showing you the function we're actually tracing. It's got the coordinates. As I trace over here, you can see the coordinates are obviously changing. As I go past the intersection point, it's also got, just note these little lines which indicate where it is. If I go into the next function again, so push up or down, it'll go along the function. Takes a little time. Even the tapping to navigate takes a little time. Let's see if it'll go out the screen. So yeah, but it's doing a fair bit of a think to navigate out of the screen. I'm going to go to the x plus 2 function, and as you can see, I don't know if you can notice, but if you look carefully on the display over here, and I'll bring in a little closer, as I navigate, you can see there's a line up there just depicting where I am. So even though you can't see the cursor, in the other ones you had no idea where the cursor was. So at least as I bring the cursor back, you can see where it is. I'll come navigate back. And there we go. So that's the navigation. There is a little bit of lag. Let's just see the zoom box. Right, so the zoom box, again, if I go shift zoom, I'm going to select the box. And you can see it says select start point. So let's say I want to zoom into that intersection over there. Navigate up, I'm hitting the execute or enter button. And as you can see, I can then start drawing the actual box using the cursor control. I hit execute and then it zooms in there. Right, so let's move on to the Casio Class Pad. Right, we've got the Casio Class Pad here. It's a little off center because I do have reflection if I'm sitting over there. We'll see how that works once I've got it powered on. Now, for those of you, I did do a video kind of introducing this as I bought it, so you'll have a good overview there. We'll switch it on, let it fire up. We're then presented with the screen. Now, what I need to do here to navigate, of course, is it has a stylus, a built-in stylus, and that is essential to navigate around this machine. So right, we can put it in center now. On this, it has a graph and table application over here. So I'm going to select that. We're then straight away presented with a split screen where you've got your graphing area down here and where we can go and enter our functions. Now, as I said, the one quirk about this is that you've got a kind of keyboard, physical keyboard, but with limited functionality. So you need to kind of drive kind of soft menus and keys to kind of enter things. We'll see how we go, and I'll bring in a little bit closer so you can see things a little better. Right, I've gone and adjusted the contrast a little bit, hopefully so that this display is a little bit easier to see, but it does cause a little bit of flicker, but we'll resolve that once we come in a bit closer. So to enter the functions, obviously now we want x squared minus 2. So we've got our variables over here on the physical keyboard. I'm going x, I'm doing the caret 2 for x squared minus 2, hitting the execute button. So that's gone and entered that first function over there. We then want x plus 2, execute that, and then we want sine of x. So immediately note I don't have the trig functions on here, so I push the keyboard button to bring up the soft display. There's a sine over there. I then go x, I'm then going to close brackets. I'll push the keyboard to pull that out the way, close brackets, execute. We are then in a position ready to graph. I'll bring it a little closer. Right, so now we're ready to kind of graph this function, and over here you can see there's a little soft button over here for graphing. We push that and bang, you can see it's graphed it down here. Now what you can do, we've got a button to make this, to resize, it'll go full screen. And now what you can do straight away, which is really handy, is navigate, but just note, and I pointed this out in the initial review, there's a fair bit of lag as you wait for it to redraw. So it's handy that you can go and navigate around the actual screen like this. The display and the kind of the coordinates noted on the axes, I must say, is very nice, but there is a fair bit of lag. We then have a zoom function, and there's a menu system where we can go and select various zooms, or straight off, or if we just go and select this zoom box over here, I can go and select that, and then using the stylus I can draw a box, release, and it takes us straight in. So that's fairly straightforward, and the redraw not too bad there, but as I said, you have the luxury of moving around, but it is a bit laggy. It does obviously then display the functions over here. If we, let's say, want to zoom into a specific point or the other zoom, if we go zoom, we can just say zoom in, and it's going straight in. It doesn't seem to give us a point where we can go on a what you have to do is go and center yourself and then go zoom in and it's going to go zoom into where you were centered. So you don't have the opportunity like with the other ones where you go and select a center point and hit enter. You have to kind of be where you want to be. Right, so let's see if we go back out to original. We get out to original. Right, if we want to go and trace a graph, we've got this over here, this little soft menu where it says XY. Click on that. Straight away it brings up a whole lot of information. We've got our coordinates at the bottom, we've got a cursor with coordinates, and we've got the function. So now here is the interesting thing. Again, with this, I would have thought that by default I could go and move around and trace the graph with the actual stylus, but as you can see I can't. I'm now forced to resort to using the cursor. So again, I can hold the cursor. If I hold it down, you can see how slow it is. Tapping is okay. If I push it up, I'm obviously getting the next function. As you can see, I've got sign of X as noted in the color. I can then move along it, but again, it's not fast. I wish, and I mean, again, I wish now can I navigate? I can't navigate around the screen. Push up to the next function. Let's just see what happens if I go out of the screen. This is painfully slow. So you can see it's gone out of the screen, but it hasn't moved the graph. It does have that kind of a line just to show you that you're out of the screen on the graph. I'm going to go down to the sin x function, and let's just see what happens if I go out of the screen navigating on that. And that one does do a redraw and go along. The kind of busy indicator on this one is a little symbol down here when it's actually busy, but that is very slow to kind of navigate around. If I go back to kind of normal functions again, I'm going to say zoom original. And as you can see, if you do move, you can see the kind of busy when it's redrawing, you've got the busy symbol down here on the screen. So there we go. Again, I think they could have done some better functionality, certainly when tracing the graph, and the processor does seem to struggle when it's doing redraws. Right, next we get to the Hewlett-Packards or the HPs. We've got the HP 50G here. We switch it on. It's sitting in its home screen where you do normal calculations. Again, note this one I've got at the moment in algebraic mode, not the normal RPN or reverse Polish notation. There are a few quirks because your graph functions are up here on the keypad. And to get to those, it's a shift, this white button shift, and then you get to them to enter your functions. But if it's in reverse Polish notation, you don't just push a shift button and then go there. You have to hold the shift button down to get to those functions. So just note that. Right, so we're going to go to, we've got y equals over here. I'm going to go shift and then y equals. It tells us there are no equations. You've got to push add to add them. So we go add, and it's showing here y16. There's kind of, I've already gone and entered stuff. Perhaps when you start this, it'll be y1 as your first function. But nonetheless, so we've got x squared, and I've got the y to the x over here. We're going squared. I'm going to come down out of that, and remember it's got this is kind of the equation writer. It has this funny system which I showed in the first video, and with that we're going to say minus 2. I'm then going to enter on that, and that's our first equation. Going to go add. Our next one is simply x plus 2. Enter on that. And then our next one, if we're going to add another one, is sine of x. So we've got the sine function straight here, x, very straightforward, enter. We've got our 3 functions. I'll now bring you in to see a graph. So here we go, you're a little closer. We've got the functions in over there. On the soft menu over here, you can see it says draw. Now the first rule of thumb on this calculator is to actually hit the erase button, because if there are previous functions that have been drawn, they will stay there and these will just overdraw those. So I'm going to push the erase feature just to make sure the graph is actually clear, and then draw. You can see the hourglass, noting that it's actually working. Must say, nice, easy, clean representation on the HP. In terms of navigation, you can see I've got a cursor there that I can move around using these cursor keys. It does move nice and fast actually when I move around. You've got an XY feature here. If I push that, it'll actually then give you your coordinates down here as you move around the graph. If I want the menu back up, I just simply push this next button over here. It brings my menu system back up. Right, and just to demonstrate the zoom, you need to take your cursor to the point you want to zoom to first. So I'll take it down over here to, let's say, the intersection point of these two graphs. I hit zoom, I go zoom in, and it zoomed in over there. Now, to tell you the truth, I don't think it zoomed in very nicely. Let's just go back out again to default. We're going to try, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to use the box feature. So if I go zoom and let's say box, we've got the cursor, as you can see on the screen. But just note, unlike the other ones where you get the opportunity to pick your point first, it's taken the initial point of your cursor. So if I go cancel, I need to place my cursor where I first want to start drawing the box. I then go box zoom. I can then start drawing my box to zoom. I then obviously hit the zoom button over here. And it is zoomed into that intersection. So next, let's go and zoom back out to default. I just want to check again with the navigation keys. If I go to the side, does it move? No. So I cannot navigate within the graph just by moving the cursor around. Next, let's go and trace the function. So we've got the trace over here. It's gone and selected the x squared minus 2, and as you can see, it goes around very quickly. If you want to see the coordinates of that, obviously you push the XY and you can see the XY at the bottom there. If I push the up button, it's going to select the next function. It's not actually showing you the name of the function at all. Select the next one and I can navigate around there. So it's certainly the navigation and the speed of the redraw is fairly quick and easy. It doesn't show you as much information on the calculator as some of the other ones do. But next, let's take a look at how the HP Prizm handles things. Right, so here we have the HP Prizm. Now, I've previously done a little intro and review of this. It's a very nice machine. It's got a touch screen, it doesn't need a stylus, and it's got a nice functional keyboard as well. So we'll just power it on. It boots up very quickly. You then have this kind of nice graphical home screen, and as you can see, our first function we've got here is to do graphing or functions. So we'll just enter on that. And along the bottom of the screen here is where it's got its kind of soft menus. As opposed to pushing soft keys, you actually touch the screen itself. Just one caveat to this can be operated in RPN mode as well. But to enter the fractions in here and to get it to work in this mode, you do need it in the kind of textbook mode. So just be aware of that in your setup. Right, so in here, let's start entering the functions. We have got the navigation of this pad over here as well. Right, so the first is x. Now x we've got on the command line over here. So we go x squared minus 2, and I can push the OK here or the enter. The next one is obviously x plus 2, and I'll do the enter. And the next one is sine, and sine this time is straight off the keyboard, so it's just sine of x, straightforward, enter. And there we've got our 3 functions. So now bringing it a little closer, we've just got a plot feature over here to make it work. Right, so now we're ready to plot it. So you also do have this, obviously, this navigation bar over here besides the touching the screen. So I hit plot and bang, it is there straight away. This calculator obviously has a very powerful processor. The other beauty is, what can we do? We can touch screen and walk around, and again, just look how quickly it responds when you navigate around the graph. Really, really, really nice. And as you navigate around, you can see it's obviously showing you coordinates. So wherever I touch the screen, it's actually already got a trace on the graph, and it's giving you the coordinates. The menu button over here then removes that, so you've got that. You can see the trace has got a dot there, so I can take the trace off, and then it's no longer tracing the graph. You kind of got free reign of where you put the cursor. If we then go to zoom, now the one thing I think HP really missed, and I've read they may do this in a next update to the software. This does have gesture control in some of the applications, but if they had a pinch zoom on this, it would just be a winner. They don't yet, but potentially that is coming in the future. We'll wait and see if they implement it. You've got the zoom here, and you can see where it says on cursor. So center on cursor, I can go zoom in, zoom out, and again the redraws are very quick. If we go further down the menu, we can go back to auto scale. We can say it's all auto scale on individual functions, or I can say all plots. It comes back out here. Let's just zoom out a little bit further. So you can see we get a nice zoom out here, and again, just moving, I must say, it really is handy to be able to zoom around, but I wish you could use gestures at this point in time. We've then seen how you have got that trace feature. You saw how I was able to navigate. Now, what I thought they should be able to do here is you can't go and select another function. You have to do that again with the up and down. Now, the rationale behind that is, I think that if you're very close and you've got a lot of functions, if you could select with your finger, you might be touching other functions by mistake. So this way I can touch over here between the 2 functions, and I'm staying on the correct one. So at the moment I'm on the sign X, and wherever I move my finger around, I can obviously put the point. I can also use the navigation, and you can see there it starts off slow and then bang, it accelerates. So they really have got a clever system for actually navigating around. Let's just see if I do go down to, let's say, the intersection point, do we get exactly there? No, it doesn't look like it. Let's just see if we do the box zoom feature. So if we go menu, zoom, it's got box. It says select a corner. So I'm going to point up over there. I'm going to go OK, select opposite corner, point down there, and as you can see, so now it's navigating around, so it's definitely a touch. So where you touch is going to size your box. So there we go, I've got the box selected, I select OK, and it goes and zooms into that. So I must say, out of all of these, it certainly does. It's got a lot of power driving it, and it's very easy to kind of navigate around the screen. Let's go back out. And I won't lie, if I at this point have any bias towards these in terms of getting the graph in and navigating around and the speed and ease of use, then it certainly goes to the HP Prime. But again, once we start looking at other functionality of these, trying to kind of perhaps trace the routes and intersection points, the others may have an advantage. But I say, so far, I certainly like this machine. Right, so I hope you found that useful. As I said, this little BC from HP at the moment certainly is my favorite. It doesn't mean that it's going to do everything perfectly. That's what we want to try to kind of unravel as we go through the next series of videos. We're going to start getting down into the nitty-gritty now. The next thing I'd like to do is check their processor performance. We've obviously seen that the HP does well at graphing, but what happens if we throw some complex graphing at it, or some complex programs or equations? Now I've already started looking at this, and so hopefully in the next video we're going to see how will they cope with their processing power. Because in some cases, if you've got a complex function or equation that you're trying to solve, I know that sometimes that can take minutes, and that could be an issue in an exam. So let's say you've got one of the older calculators taking minutes, but something, let's say like the HP Prime taking a few seconds, that could be important to you. But anyway, thanks for watching. Certainly if you do want to support me, there's a link down below to these calculators, and do remember to give us a thumbs up if you gain any value, and I'll catch you soon for the next video. Cheers.